Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tavern Adjacent. I'm recording this one kind of late in the development process, like day before kind of stuff. But hey, it's the Tavern Adjacent podcast. Doesn't require a lot of editing, so we're all good in that regard. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple things. We're bringing it back all the way to the beginning of Tavern Adjacent. One of our first topics ever was Baldur's Gate 3. And so, we're here. Talk about Baldur's Gate 3. It's coming out very soon in August/September if you're on PlayStation 5. And it is currently embroiled in one of the dumbest controversies I have ever seen in my life. We're going to talk about that. After that, we're going to talk about one-shots. I ran my first ever, somewhat successful one-shot. I'm going to talk about the lessons learned and what I could still improve on because, guys, I love running full campaigns, but I suck at running one-shots. And then finally, we're going to end off this episode with Crispy's Homebrew Corner, where we are going to talk about my homebrew races. We're going to talk about them more. We've got the orcs, the humans, and the ASMR with minor revamps that I think you guys might enjoy. So without further ado, guys, let's get started. Okay, so the dumbest controversy I've ever seen. It came from Twitter, naturally. And I want to get this out of the way. I understand some of the points being made here. I just want to say that as a consumer, this whole controversy is very concerning to me. I will also say at the top, this isn't really a D&D thing. This is a video game thing that's related to D&D since Baldur's Gate is a Dungeons & Dragons video game. If you're unaware, Baldur's Gate and their developer have been putting in the work. It looks like this is going to be a very, very good title. There is a lot of hype surrounding it. The demo has received a lot of positive feedback, and for good reason. This looks like it's going to be a really great video game, and as a CRPG, a fairly niche type of video game in this industry, this is a big deal. It's really cool to see a product that is somewhat niche getting so much attention from the media, so much positive attention, and it's great. It's really awesome, but some people are not entirely happy about that. There was a thread that went, I wouldn't say like super viral, but it got a lot of attention enough that I saw it, where a bunch of game developers were getting together to say, like, look, I know people are saying that Baldur's Gate is raising the bar, but let's not let that happen because Baldur's Gate is the exception, not the rule. We shouldn't use Baldur's Gate to judge other RPGs. As somebody who is a huge fan of role-playing games in the video game sense and also in the tabletop gaming sense, but as someone who played role-playing games in the video game sense way before I even got into TTRPGs, this sucked to hear from game developers, some of which I genuinely respected. Now, I want to start off by saying, again, I kind of get it. What these guys are saying is essentially this. Baldur's Gate is a game that has a lot of fortunate, scenarios surrounding it. The company behind Baldur's Gate, they managed to get a hands on the D&D license, ignoring the fact that it was a big struggle to get that license and that getting licenses isn't just something that you randomly fall into. It takes a lot of negotiating, especially if you're a smaller company, and a lot of hard work. But, anyway, ignoring that, they managed to get the D&D license for Baldur's Gate 3. They put years and years of development into Baldur's Gate 3, and that is what resulted in this incredible game, and therefore we shouldn't hold other games to the same standard. It was frustrating to hear this because, unfortunately, first and foremost, this is kind of how the gaming world works. Baldur's Gate 3 is not the first really great video game to release in the world. All the way back when World of Warcraft released, circa 2004? When World of Warcraft released, it raised the bar for MMOs across the board. Other MMOs had to get better than WoW in order to survive, because that's how it works. If people see a game that's better than another game, they're going to play the better game, the game they like more. That's the market, man. I really don't know what to tell you. You can't just say, oh, you shouldn't hold us to those expectations. If they don't find your game fun, they're not going to like it. I don't know what to tell you. The same thing goes here with Baldur's Gate. Now, of course, the person who originally posted this, it seems like they work on smaller projects. And to that extent, I do get it. You can't expect an indie studio. Baldur's Gate is developed by technically an indie company, but they're a big indie company. So, anyway, you can't expect smaller indie studios to be making something like Baldur's Gate. This obviously has a lot of talent, a lot of time, and a lot of money behind it. Obviously, like, 4 dudes working out of a small office aren't going to make this. Okay, and no reasonable person is going to expect a small indie studio, an actually small indie studio, to make Baldur's Gate. Like, that's not something a reasonable person expects. But I'm seeing Blizzard developers chiming in here, and I'm like, guys, you guys are part of Activision Blizzard, a gargantuan company much bigger than the one who developed Baldur's Gate. And you guys, for the most part, have been, and this is not the fault of developers, mostly, but Activision Blizzard, developers or no, have been cranking out some honestly pretty average games. Like, I like Dragonflight as much as the next dude, but honestly, even as a big WoW fan, and even though I acknowledge that Dragonflight is a pretty solid expansion, World of Warcraft Dragonflight really hasn't been holding my attention. I really can't put my finger on why, but, it hasn't. The same thing with Overwatch 2. God, Overwatch 2 is a disaster of a game. And now I'm seeing people from Blizzard, people who work on those games, saying that Baldur's Gate is holding everyone to too high a standard. Now, I'm not trying to say that game developers are these evil, lazy, morons. Obviously not. Look, a lot of the reason why games like Overwatch 2 or World of Warcraft go down the drain sometimes, a big reason why isn't because of the developers. It's because of some corporate head, putting in some insane time constraints or instilling some microtransactions or the concept of the game being bad from the get-go and developers being forced to work on a flawed concept. That kind of thing happens. Video games are a massive clock with a billion gears, and frankly, even with my limited experience in the industry, I have the knowledge to say this with confidence. It's a miracle that any game turns out like Baldur's Gate. Hell, it's a miracle that any game turns out halfway decent at all. There are so many moving parts. There's so many things that go wrong. So many people who sometimes are actively trying to sabotage you in their efforts to make more money. I mean, seriously, it is ridiculous. And then this goes for so many media fields. It goes for movies, television shows, video games, just simple social media apps, whatever. It's a miracle that any of these work out because there are so many factors put into it. So this is not me trying to rail against game developers. But as a consumer, it is frustrating when I am online looking at this incredible D&D RPG, an incredible RPG that works in a niche genre, makes it work incredibly well, developed by people at Larian Studios who clearly care a lot about not only Baldur's Gate 3 as a video game, but also Dungeons & Dragons as an IP and as a story and as a world, as a license. They're doing so well. They're working so hard. And so many people in this Twitter thread almost seem to be alluding that their success is just because of, good fortune, which, as Machiavelli once wrote, a lot of success is due to good fortune, but to ignore the hard work that's clearly been put into making this game what it is, it just reeks of saltiness almost. I mean, the point that really irked me was when they were not making light, but, when people were saying that, Larian Studios managed to get the D&D license, as if it's just something that they did, casually. As if getting a massive license like Dungeons and Dragons isn't an entire process on its own. Larian isn't like Activision, Blizzard, or Ubisoft, right? They're not a small, tiny company by any means, but they are an independent developer. And the process of getting the license was not easy on their part. It was kind of a struggle for a little bit. The same thing with the amount of time it's taken to make this game. People are framing the timeline of the game as, that's why it's good. They don't have any time limits. And you're right. I'm sure that there were time limits behind the scenes that we don't know about, by the way. It's not like, your corporate overlords are like, yep, take as much time as you need. There's no deadlines. No, there's always deadlines. Are you kidding me? But on top of that, the timeline that they made this game in, I mean, they're making this game during the pandemic too. They're working through the pandemic, and you're saying that, that was, fortunate for them? No, that was a pain in the bum, I'm sure. So many game developers struggled through the pandemic, Larian Studios and Baldur's Gate 3 being no exception. I mean, hell, there's a war going on in some of the places where they work, and they're still making this game. You're gonna say that that's, good fortune for them, that they got lucky? No. Look, there's obviously a lot of factors that go into Baldur's Gate succeeding, just like there's a lot of factors going into anything succeeding. But you can't expect people to just forget about the good games in their life just so that we can excuse mediocrity or hell, even corporate money grubbing, right? Again, it's crazy to me that this focus is all around Baldur's Gate specifically. I didn't see tweets like this coming out when God of War Ragnarok came out in November, or when Elden Ring came out, or Tears of the Kingdom. These are games released by massive studios. I don't see anyone going, oh, careful everyone, we shouldn't hold new games to these unrealistic standards. But the moment a more niche thing like Baldur's Gate, I'm using the IGN demo. It turns out to not just be gameplay. There's a human being on my screen. What's going on? Oh, we're back to gameplay. Great. Sorry about that. I'm using the IGN demo because unfortunately I don't have Baldur's Gate footage on my computer as of right now. Anyway, my point is, what was my point? Oh, crap. I found my point. The moment when something a little bit more niche comes out and finds success, then I got jackals jumping out of Twitter to say that, oh, this is unrealistic standards. What? Come on. Really? Where were you during all these other great games saying this stuff? As if only huge game developers like Santa Monica are allowed to succeed without anyone questioning how fortunate they were to make the game. Ignoring the fact that a studio like Santa Monica or Naughty Dog is probably in a more fortunate position than Larian, given their close relationship to a big company like Sony. Come on. Again, I'm not trying to frame game development as easy or developers as lazy. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that to see a lot of people, a lot of respected developers from big companies in this thread saying things about Baldur's Gate and how they were just fortunate to be in this position, it sucks as a consumer and somebody who loves video games. I'm a huge fan of a lot of great video games. But it just sucks that I guess we're not allowed to hold developers and companies, huge companies that make so much money, to a high standard because it's unrealistic. Look, I'm not saying that every indie game needs to be Baldur's Gate, but this is going to raise the bar. That's kind of how it works. Just like how God of War raised the bar, just like how Elden Ring raised the bar, just like how Skyrim raised the bar in 2011. When games release, you gotta move to improve. I mean, dang, I remember when Apex Legends busted out into the scene completely randomly, Fortnite rushed to put in that respawn mechanic that Apex has because they knew that their game would need it in order to continue in this industry because they realized that Apex was innovating and they wanted Fortnite to do the same. And Fortnite has been trying to do that ever since. Right? So it's just the way things are in an active industry like the gaming industry. You gotta compete. You gotta make good stuff. Otherwise, you're gonna be left behind. You're not gonna get as much attention. Like, I don't know what to say, man. That's just how it works. It's funny because this being a D&D product, this whole controversy kind of made me think of the Matt Mercer effect. This whole controversy made me think of dungeon masters who say like, oh, you guys are holding me to Matt Mercer expectations. Now, of course, the Matt Mercer effect is completely different. You know, when you're running D&D, you're not running a paid product. And yeah, like at the end of the day, you're running it for fun, and people shouldn't hold you to insane Matt Mercer-esque expectations because at the end of the day, you're just doing this for fun. But these guys aren't just doing it for fun. Like, these game developers are doing this for profit. They're working for for-profit companies. We're paying for these products, and that means I do hold it to a high standard, right? It's not like the Matt Mercer effect where people are just playing D&D. This isn't playing D&D. This is making video games, not just for D&D, but for the entire industry. So yeah, that is the stupid controversy revolving around Larian Studios and Baldur's Gate 3. Bit different than what we normally talk about. This is normally just a TTRPG podcast, but I wanted to jump on this train and talk about something video game related for a change because I know a lot of you guys play RPGs and video games in general, and I thought it would be appropriate to just talk about this because it got a lot of attention, and I don't think it's the right kind of attention for a game like Baldur's Gate. Can we just celebrate the achievement that these developers have done? They've worked so hard to get here, to make a game that, for the most part, at least from what I've seen, looks freaking incredible. I've never played an RPG of this genre, of this niche, and I'm looking forward to jumping in it. Like, Larian Studios have impressed me, even as a guy who's not normally in this genre. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Can we celebrate the achievement that these people have put together, not put them down for being fortunate? That would be great. But anyway, A take you only expect to see on the rapidly crumbling platform of Twitter. Now it's time to move on to me. Alright, last episode we talked about some really dumb things, and people were asking me, like, Crispy, where's the traditional D&D topics? Well, it's back, dude. I'm here to give you guys an update on my own DMing career and give you guys some advice that I learned from my own mistakes. It's time to talk about running one-shots. Alright, we're back. And we're back to talk about one-shots. One-shots in Dungeons & Dragons. One-shots are great. They allow you to tell a self-contained story on a smaller scale that has a lot less depth, but also a lot less length than the full campaign, where you feel like you need to dedicate to maybe years of work. I normally am running full campaigns. I've got a home game group who I've been running with for years now. We've done 2 multi-year campaigns. War for Baldur was our first one, where our party collected relics and fought against Orcus, and our second campaign, Descent into the Vale, where our party delved into ancient ruins to unravel a conspiracy tied to the Nightmare King Vecna. Lots of fun. Campaign 3 coming up soon, but, I need a bit of a buffer, right? There's a lot of prep involved in creating a whole new continent for this new campaign, whole new cultures and peoples and things for them to interact with and stuff like that. And so I ran a one-shot. One of my first one-shots. My first one-shot with this home game group, in fact. Now, I have played one-shots in the past, short campaigns and stuff, but this is like the first time I've ever run like a real just one-shot. I ran short campaigns for this channel, which was a lot of work. So, recently I've been thinking like, hey, short campaigns aren't working out, but one-shots have a lot less risk involved because it's just one game, right? So that's just a lot less work for everyone involved, including me. So, I decided to try it out with my home game first, and I want to talk about how it went. So the premise of the one-shot is simple. It's a wedding one-shot between these 2 lovely ladies, Kalia Solfero and Daphne Nordstrom. These 2 are getting married, and they've invited their friends to experience their wedding. But unfortunately, some evil wedding crashers crash the event, and the party need to stop them from stealing away powerful artifacts. Now, these powerful artifacts that were stolen away are actually a tie-in to the second campaign. So these are all characters from the first campaign, the one where they were fighting Orcus. At the end of that game, they collected a bunch of artifacts, locked them away. Now, in the second campaign, 10 years later, a lot of those artifacts have ended up in the hands of outlaws and pirates and such, and this game right here serves as that little explanation. Now, in the second campaign, my home game group just assumed, like, okay, over the course of 10 years, eventually these dark artifacts of power, Hand of Vecna, Horn of Orcus, stuff like that, they get lost, they get stolen, what have you, but here it shows what happened exactly. So, during the events of this beautiful, amazing wedding, the party get attacked by a powerful demon. They slay it, and after slaying it, they realize that this was just a distraction. All of the heroes inside the city were lured out to attend this wedding, and thus they were given, the bad guys that is, were given an opportunity to steal powerful relics and auction them off. So the party got to go to this auction where they saw a bunch of familiar bad guys from the second campaign that obviously the campaign 1 characters aren't familiar with, but the players are. Lots of fun. Now, in terms of the structure of the one-shot, there was a lot more role-playing than I imagined. I thought that the characters, that the people playing these characters, they wouldn't be as, into the roleplay, because we haven't been in campaign 1 with these characters for years now. But they slipped that glove right on, and they really liked talking to old friends from campaign 1, old NPCs that I haven't roleplayed as for years, with the exception being Kalia Solfera and Crawford Cyrillish, 2 characters that made an appearance in my actual plays. But even still, I was still trying to fit that glove on, whereas my players kind of slipped into it right away, interacting and joking with these characters, and they were clearly having a lot of fun with it. So I greatly underestimated the amount of time that would go into the roleplay. The banter just, kept on going and going, and, there were times where I would try to, move it on, but it was clear the party were having fun, so I just let it keep on going. And that is one of the things with a one-shot that I struggle with. I really struggle with just, pushing the party forward. With a one-shot, you have a much more limited amount of time. In a huge, long campaign, I can always just, kick the can down the road, right? Like, if we don't get to that encounter, no problemo. Just whoop, kick it down the road. We can do it in another session, whatever. If a role-play moment didn't happen that I was thinking would happen in this game, boop, kick it down the road. We can do it in another game, no big deal. But with a one-shot, this is it. If we don't get it in here, we don't get it at all, right? So, again, by the way, I haven't said this before, but I want to clarify. You can expand a one-shot. You can make it a two-shot, a three-shot. But here, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to dedicate, dang it. I wanted this to be just one game. And, when the game was about an hour in, I realized, like, okay, this is probably where we've got to, like, start the first encounter. The first encounter against a powerful demon mini-boss. After that, the party would then fight a little boss gauntlet of Campaign 2 villains. Because I thought it would be fun for Campaign 2 villains to have a boss gauntlet against the Campaign 1 party. I thought that would be enjoyable. So that was the general combat structure of the one-shot, and then there would be roleplay in between. The early stages of roleplay are just like getting back in the groove of the characters. Then we have the mini-boss encounter. Then we have a sad roleplay moment because the wedding has been destroyed. Then the encouraging roleplay moment to get the party to, go off and heed the call of action, which they almost always do. And then a triumphant battle against old enemies from Campaign 2. Lots of fun, right? And at the very end, we do the ceremony, the wedding. I have a nice little song ready, and scene, right? Now, of course, that's the plan in my head, but, not everything always goes according to plan. That opening roleplay moment, like I said, with the characters getting back into the groove, that was a lot longer than I thought it would be. The mini-boss was about as long as I thought it would be, only about 3 rounds of combat, which totaled out to 30 minutes, not bad. And then the sad roleplay moments where the party were, figuring out what to do next after the wedding was destroyed and comforting Kalia Solfero, who obviously is one of the brides. That moment was pretty short, but the call to action moment was pretty long. I didn't expect it to be that long, with the party trying to decide how they're going to deal with this issue, what they're going to do, because the artifacts that were stolen, they were taken into hell, so they kind of got to figure out a way to get in there first. I will admit, a big flaw with this one-shot. Lack of prep. I was way cocky. I haven't prepped D&D game in a few weeks, so I kind of forgot how much work I put into it, and dang, I put a lot more work than a lot of DMs do. My games are a lot more theatrical. There's lots of musical cues, lots of visual elements, stuff like that, sound effects and such, and therefore, I've got to set that kind of thing up. It's not just something that just happens. I got to set that kind of thing up, and I forgot how long it takes me. Also, I kind of fell back into my lazy encounter prep where I don't read the stat blocks of the monsters, right? I wasn't reading the monster's tactics. The Beholder stat block I was using from Flee Mortals has an ability where if a creature hits it with a melee attack, it can use its reaction to push the creature away. Never use that in the combat, even though it would have been extremely pertinent. I was not using all the abilities at my disposal, and that is on me, right? That is completely my bad. I was trying to rush the prep just to get it done, but on top of all that, there was things I just straight up forgot about. My party had these legendary magical items, and ever since Campaign 1, which was years ago, I've lost the cards, so I had to remake them. I completely forgot how to do that. I completely forgot about remaking the legendary magical items that were central to their character builds. My bad. There was roleplay moments and scenes that were integral to setting up events in Campaign 2, which obviously has already happened, so it's not a super big deal, but there were some really cool roleplay moments with our fighter that I completely forgot about, and, it resulted in our fighter getting less time in the spotlight than I intended, which sucked. I was not taking as thorough of notes, and I just, in general, wasn't as prepared. That's why I cannot exaggerate this enough, I despise the advice of, don't over-prepare, under-preparing is fine. Shut up! The worst sessions I've ever run, and the worst sessions I've ever experienced, were because either I was unprepared, or the DM wasn't prepared. Okay, I would way rather have a DM who preps too much than a DM who preps not at all. Are you kidding me? I hate that advice with a passion. Stop giving it. The reason this game was such a struggle for me to run was not just because it was a one-shot with a more limited time scale. It was also because I was prepping very last minute. I should not have done that. I should have been more ready to run this game, especially since this is the culmination of a really awesome plot line, the only romance I've ever done. Now, is this me trying to say that the session was a horror story? No, it was still a lot of fun. It's just the encounter design was definitely weaker overall. The boss rush was not as good. In my games, instead of legendary actions, we have villain actions, which are just legendary actions, but better. They're just souped up, more theatric, more extreme legendary actions. That's what villain actions are. They're bigger, badder, cooler, etc. I love Macroville style in that, but I didn't read the villain actions before we started the combat, and therefore the villain actions weren't nearly as cool as they usually are. Like, I'm used to villain actions being like Frost Cataclysm, where the massive white dragon like flies up into the air and then slams to the ground like a meteor, causing like 45 points of bludgeoning damage and 45 points of frost damage, and pushing the party back and engulfing the area in a huge wintry storm. That's cool, right? But the villain actions that I was ready to use, I just screenshotted some devil villain actions because they were in hell and didn't think anything of it. But honestly, they were kind of lame. They're mostly movement based. And the boss was stationary. He can't use movement based villain actions if he's stationary. Like, are you kidding me, Crispy? You just couldn't read that in advance? Guess I couldn't. My bad. I messed up there. There were, a number of times where I messed up, but overall, really, this was a game that was carried by the party. They were doing such a great job role-playing, and I was having a lot of fun role-playing with them. I was primarily role-playing through Kalia Solfero, and, this is a character that the party really liked. I mean, they basically accepted her into the party as a full-fledged member, constantly asking me, hey, can we take her on a quest? Can we take her with us? Can she come with us? Blah, 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 blah. So clearly they like her, and they like role-playing with her, and I like role-playing as her. That obviously helps. So it was great to, bring these relationships back into the fold. Not just the romantic relationship between Daphne and Kalia, the bride and bride, but also the relationship between Kalia and the other party members, because they're all friends. Also, Kalia's father, Crawford, who appeared in Shadow of Carcones and Crown of Deceit, he's got this antagonistic relationship with the druid, and it was really fun to play that out. This is a game where the roleplay was really strong. And that's not typical for my home game. Usually the roleplay is just kind of something we sort of engage with, but we're not really a roleplay-centric party. We're not talking in character a lot of the time. But, over the years we've been playing with each other, we have gotten more roleplay centric. We have been more focused on RPing our characters and, talking in first person and doing all that fun stuff. And I've always been doing that because, I got inspired to DM by Matt Mercer and Critical Role. I was inspired to get into D&D in general by Dice Camera Action. And at that point, I wasn't really into the roleplay stuff, but after watching Critical Role, I was way more engaged with roleplaying. But my players, not so much. Nowadays, I have a different expectation. Now my players are engaging with the roleplay. Now my players are talking in first person. They're speaking as their characters, They're not going extreme with it or anything, but they're doing a really good job. And I have been trying to get better at reciprocating, right? Obviously, the more time roleplay takes up, the less time combat can take up, which is why, that initial mini-boss encounter with the demon, that was made to be short. It was my intention for that to not take up too much time, so that the boss rush can have a good length of time to really be engaging. Unfortunately, because my encounter design was weaker, because I wasn't reading the stat blocks properly, and I wasn't, thinking of all the abilities, my encounter design suffered, and therefore it wasn't as engaging as I think it could have been, but I don't think it was a horrible encounter by any means. I think my biggest successes as a DM happen when I can just focus on one monster. When there is one big bad, and the party just attack that one thing. A solo bad guy with maybe a little bit of minions. My best encounters are like that. The final encounter of Shadow over Carconos, great example of a very powerful Medusa boss that was singular for the most part. A completely singular boss the party was fighting. The final boss of Descent into the Veil is Vecna, a creature, a person with no adds. He only used a couple of skeletons this one time in an early phase of the fight. For the most part, he was mostly going at it solo. And that was cool. That was great. I liked framing Vecna that way. But it also just gave me a chance to focus on that stat block, to focus on the Vecna stats and understand all of his abilities thoroughly. I understand how his abilities worked, and I understood how to use them, and that made the fight way more engaging. In terms of how I would engage with this kind of encounter design in a one-shot sense, I think I should have focused on more of the singular antagonist. That's where my strength lies, and I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to one-shots, so I should have minimized the amount of stuff that I am purposefully not strong in, I'm not good at making an encounter with 4 different mini bosses all at once. That's just way too much for me to focus on. I'm much better at making an encounter with one bad guy instead. And since I'm more uncomfortable in a one-shot scenario, I should have focused on the thing that makes me comfortable in an encounter building sense, which is focusing on a single boss. You know, as a DM, you gotta balance those strengths and those weaknesses. Don't stack weaknesses against you, you know? It could help you to learn, but at the same time, you want to provide a good experience for your players and yourself. So don't stack your weaknesses up. You know, handle your weaknesses one at a time. If you're trying to get better at one-shots, get better at one-shots. Don't try to get better at 1,000 things at once because you're just gonna overwhelm yourself, right? Focus on one thing at a time, maybe 2 things at a time, right? So yeah, that was my one-shot experience. In terms of what I would learn from this, first and foremost, I honestly didn't struggle with keeping down on the time. Like, the game was 4 hours long, which honestly, that's pretty average. And it was really, not really 4 hours. I think it was mostly like 3 hours and 30 minutes because we started kind of late. So I think 3 hours, 30 minutes is actually more of an appropriate timeline. And you know what? That checks out. I think that that's a great, like, solid amount of time for a D&D game. 3 hours, 30 minutes. Great. Good. You know, I'm proud of that time frame, and we got a lot of content in there. Like, even though there were some roleplay moments we missed out on, for the most part, we didn't lose out on anything. I didn't have to cut any encounters or anything like that. We got all the encounters in, all the major roleplay moments in. We had time for a beautiful wedding ceremony at the end of the session where the party got to give their speeches and their wedding vows and stuff. That was crazy. I didn't expect that. They had, like, wedding vows and stuff prepared. I was not ready for that. But, you know, my party were all prepared and ready. That was awesome. But yeah, that is the main success. I'm proud of the time frame. I am not proud of my prep. My prep was weak here. I have to be better at prepping just over a period of time. You know, instead of prepping for 4 hours straight the day of the session, prep an hour per day over the course of the week. I'll prep better. I don't know if you guys work the same way, but that's how I work. Okay, I work better over a period of time instead of just crunching everything at once. Okay, when I crunch everything at once, I panic, I rush, I'm not doing as well. All right? But if I prep over time, you know, I'm much more relaxed. I can, like, focus on the details, and I can focus on improving what I'm working on rather than just trying to get it out as soon as possible, right? Get it done and get it over with. So yeah, main success, main lesson still to learn. That's my one-shot experience. I hope you guys learned something from that. I hope you guys can run your own one-shot successfully. And hey, let me know if you're interested in seeing one-shots on this channel. Like, running mini campaigns didn't really work out for me. It was a lot of work for not a lot of payoff, and it just was too much for Crispy's Tavern to handle. However, at the same time, one-shots not off the table. So yeah, let me know if you guys are interested in that. But anyway, with that being said, it's time to move on to our final segment. It's time to talk about some crispy homebrew. Alright, we're back. We're back to talk once again about my little D&D slight adjustment, which is aka my D&D rewrite. You know, I don't like calling it a rewrite because a rewrite sounds like a lot more involved than what I'm doing right here. My biggest change was to backgrounds, which I completely revamped, gave them a lot more bonuses, made the gameplay effect of backgrounds more evident, gave them a lot of really fun roleplay bonuses. With races, I'm more just slightly tweaking them. With races, what I'm doing is I'm giving them traits, a series of traits that are generic, shared across multiple races. For example, multiple races have unnatural speed, allowing them to dash with their bonus action. Multiple races have skillful, which gives them an extra skill proficiency. Multiple races can be strong. You know, that is something that can be shared across multiple different peoples. And then they have a unique passive trait and a unique active trait. So every race has something that makes them completely 100% unique. For example, Von Wheel, a race we talked about last episode, are scavengers of the dead, allowing them to modify their own bodies with pieces of those that they have killed using their active ability. That's something that's unique to the Von Wheel. No other race has access to that. So we're continuing down that train. However, right now we're talking about human, Aasimar, and Orc. Races that already exist in D&D and that didn't really need a lot of changes. But I did still make some changes nonetheless to make their roles a lot more evident inside of my own sandbox. So, before we get into the actual traits and abilities of starting with the human, let's talk about the lore. Determined children of the New World. Originating on the eastern continent of Aora, humans have since spread to every corner of Eris. Their population is mainly centralized in their kingdoms and empires, primarily the free cities in the east and the Ardinian Empire to the west. Most strive to secure their place in the world, creating art, amassing wealth, delving for the arcane, or questing for the secrets of the realm. While their exact origins are disputed, many of humanity's religious beliefs revolve around their sun god, who they believe slew the abyssal chaos at the dawn of time, an action that both safeguarded the world from evil and led to the birth of the demon hordes. The sun god Lathander's churches are common in the villages and cities of Ardinia, with his clerics preaching that his blessings have granted their prosperity. Humans are as diverse in appearance as they are in goals, but whoever they are and wherever they come from, their determination is to be famed and feared. As for the human abilities, the humans have the following abilities. Their passive skill is you gain fortune whenever you finish a long rest or a short rest. Fortune being what I call inspiration, the inspiration where you re-roll a dice. I don't like how inspiration and bardic inspiration are the two terms for two very different things. I hate that, in fact. I would rather it be changed entirely, and that's why I added fortune as a new term. The active skill of the humans is, as a reaction, you grant your fortune die to a creature within 30 feet that failed a skill check, attack roll, or saving throw. If the fortune is used in an attack roll, the creature can re-roll ones on the damage die. This allows humans to inspire their allies and give them some benefits in combat. This is a pretty minor active bonus, all things considered. However, fortune can be acquired in multiple different ways. There are backgrounds, for example, that grant fortune. So, for example, if a human is the criminal background, they can get fortune whenever they fail certain skill checks by a major amount. That would allow them to do their active skill much more often. Also, DMs can award fortune for roleplay moments, for example, the same way a DM would award inspiration, because, fortune is just inspiration with a different name. Now, the traits, the generic stuff the human has, skillful, you gain proficiency in one skill of your choice. Tongues, you gain one language of your choice. And abundant talent, you gain a level 1 feat of your choice. Ripped straight from 1D&D. These are abilities that make the humans more customizable, given that their passive and active skills are much less, in your face than something like the Soulsworn, who have a bite attack, for example. Humans are much more lax on the passive and active traits, whereas their generic traits give them more customizability. I want humans to be the most customizable option you could pick in my game. And I think that's a general fantasy that I think WotC's going for with 1D&D as well. Now, that's the humans, that's the lore of humans, that is the abilities of humans. Pretty simple, minor tweaks and reworks to what's already there with the human race. But moving on, in my world, and I know some people are going to lose their minds over this, Aasimar are a human lineage. Humans are the people that are most closely related to a celestial being, with their god Lathander being a major presence, right? So it made sense that Aasimar would be something that is bestowed from that lineage, right? So Aasimar have always been aesthetically as well, also just humans with glowing eyes. Honestly, in my own world, they're not usually that, wow in terms of appearance. In fact, in D&D in general, they're not usually that wow in terms of appearance. So yeah, I've made Aasimar a human lineage in my world. The only thing that does, by the way, is basically just have them share some traits with humans. They share traits with humans, but their passive ability and their active ability still completely unique to the Aasimar. So before we get into that, though, time for the lore. Lightborn inheritors of ancient power. While many humans worship the celestial power of Lathander, the Aasimar embody it. These select few are born with radiant magics infused into their blood and possess luminous features that expose their true heritage. Scholars of the Free Cities have done extensive research into why this phenomenon occurs, to no avail. Many of the sun god Lathander's more evangelical followers believe Aasimar to be destined champions of the gods, or omens of great fortune, but the plain truth is much simpler. Aasimar are still human and still mortal, possessing the same capability for good and ill. Many Aasimar go out into the world to search for their origin or delve for a way to grow their magical prowess. But, like all mortal races, the Aasimar have no clear destiny, but their human spirit will lead them to one nonetheless. As an Aasimar, you gain the following traits. Tongues, you gain one language of your choice. Dark vision, you can see through dim light or non-magical darkness within 60 feet. You can't discern color, only shades of gray. Skillful, you gain proficiency in one skill of your choice. Skillful and tongues being traits shared with the humans, showing their shared lineage. Now, the passive skill. The dual resistance. You have resistance to radiant and necrotic damage. I am tempted to expand this to also give them advantage on saving throws against magical effects, since resistance to those two damage types, I feel like it's powerful, but at the same time, I've been, developing out other races and feel like, is this too little? I think I'm going to leave it as is, because resistance to radiant and necrotic damage, is not nothing. Like, that's dual resistance that no other race has. That's why it's a unique trait rather than a generic one. Normally, resistance, like the resistance Dragonborn have, for example, that would be a generic trait, not a unique one. But for ASMR, this is a unique trait because no other race in my sandbox has resistance to 2 types of damage, right? So, anyway, as for the active ability, this is the more fun one. You know the light cantrip. Charisma is your spellcasting modifier for it. In addition, while the cantrip is active, you can use your bonus action to infuse the light with healing magic, choosing one creature in the light's radius to heal. The creature regains hit points equal to your level plus your proficiency bonus. This healing can't be done again until the next dawn. Now, this is an ability that I went back and forth on. The light cantrip is something that ASMR have access to in normal 5e. However, I want to expand it to be a bit more active, as the active ability category implies. ASMR in my game can use that light to heal. I really, really like this because light is something that can be placed on a person. At least that's how I've always ruled it. For example, an ASMR can cast light on another ally's weapon, and therefore, as long as the ASMR is within 30 feet, pretty large radius, that person has a bonus action heal in their hand. The ASMR obviously needs to proc it, but that means that as long as they're allies within 30 feet, the ASMR can always grant them that bonus action to heal. I really, really like this. It can be really, really clutch, especially since in my game, cantrips and temp hit points don't stabilize targets. You need first level spells or powerful abilities. This being one of them. This is going to be something that can stabilize an ally. So if you place that light on somebody that goes down and then use your bonus action to get them up, that's a dang good effect. A bonus action stabilization, not bad at all, really. Of course, you can only use it once per day. I went back and forth because the Soulsworn, my vampire race, they can use their healing ability an amount of times equal to their proficiency bonus, which is a good amount of times per day, especially at higher levels. Whereas ASMR are kind of stuck doing this once per day. I decided to make it once per day because the Soulsworn, in order to take advantage of their healing bite, they need to take up a whole action to do it. Whereas the ASMR can just cast a light cantrip before combat and then use their bonus action to do it during combat, which is a lot less taxing on the action economy, right? I think that it is a pretty potent skill as a healing, and especially since if you can keep on doing this and keep on stabilizing people, I feel like it's going to create that, that game of whack-a-mole that I hate in D&D. That's why I'm going to limit it to only being done once per day, especially since it's not like the ability in general can only be done once per day. You can cast the light cantrip as much as you want. It's a cantrip. The only thing that can be done once per day is the healing thing. So I think overall, it's a pretty balanced skill. You might have noticed that ASMR can't fly in this version. I hate flying. I'm sorry. I play on a 2D map plane. This is a me thing. I play on a 2D map plane. So therefore, flying is just a pain for me to keep track of. I don't like it. So I try and minimize it as much as possible, even with when I'm playing like stuff like dragons, right? So yeah, there you go. I'm not doing a flying thing with ASMR. I'm doing instead focusing on their luminous stuff and their light and their healing magic connected to the celestial powers. So yeah, that is the ASMR. Those are our human lineages. And, going off of, my love of Warcraft that I expressed in the first section, we're going to end this off with, at least in Warcraft, the humans' arch nemesis. Though they're not really their arch nemesis in my homebrew world. We'll get into it. We're ending this off with the orc. One of my favorite races in just fantasy in general. Let's start with the lore. Born from war. Bound by survival. While most think of the southern deserts as an inhospitable wasteland, the Garden Wastes are the first home of the mighty orcs. When the High Elves first migrated southward, their territorial war against the orcs of the First Age marked the earliest known armed conflict among the mortal people. A conflict where the orcs proved their ferocity. These massive, tusked warriors are famed for their might and tenacity. It is in the harshest environments in the world that orcs built their clans, finding value where most would only see emptiness. Orcs are among the most diverse people on Eris, both in culture and in location. Since they appeared in the First Age, orcs migrated across the world, forming many clans and customs. From the giant slayers of Stahamir to the shamanistic society of Pangora, orcs have certainly made their mark upon the world. There are many, many enemies of the orcish people that would seek to wipe that mark from the world, but the orcs will endure. They always do. Orcs, man. I love me some good, burly, orcish warriors, right? In case you couldn't tell by that, I'm a big fan of stuff like Warcraft, and I've carried that sort of like honorable tenacity in the orcish culture over to my own homebrew. It's been a lot of fun. Orcs in my world are mostly focused on their legacies, their histories, what they've endured, what they've survived. One of the major orcish characters my party came across was Zagron Bladebreaker, an old orc who left his clan because he realized he hadn't really done anything with his life, and he wanted to die a really epic death, not just sitting around waiting for it to come. He wanted to do something with his life. He wanted to finally find some kind of purpose, and that is what a lot of orc cultures do. However, like I said, orcish cultures are very diverse in my world. They live all across the world. It's not like humans that just kind of go everywhere. Orcs are just spread to like the most remote corners, but they're all very distant from one another, meaning that they've formed very distinct cultures. I don't really have time to go into all of them. Some of those cultures being incredibly honorable warrior clans that hunt down the monsters of the frigid north. Some of them being wicked warmongers worshipping demonic gods. You know, it's all a lot of cool orcish cultures and customs and civilizations that I haven't fully developed yet, obviously. This was just a little lore blurb, but I had a lot of fun with it. Lore aside, though, let's not talk about the talents. As an orc, you get the following traits. Dark vision, you can see through dim light or non-magical darkness within 60 feet. You can't discern color, only shades of gray. Powerful build, your carrying capacity is the same as large creatures, basically it's ×2. And unnatural speed, you can use your bonus action to dash. I didn't think I would give them this, but this is something that WotC gave orcs in 1D&D, and I think it makes sense. I like the aesthetic of a giant orc making its way towards you as fast as humanly possible. Unnatural speed, I should say. This is also a trait that's only shared with the Vanwheel, a race that's pretty similar to orcs in terms of their culture and customs, so I thought it made sense for both of these tough survivalist peoples to have unnatural speed. Now, their unique passive skill. After taking mundane damage, non-magical, piercing, slashing, bludgeoning, you can use your reaction to regain an amount of hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. Each time you use a skill, you gain a level of exhaustion. This is interesting. This is something that WotC orcs can do too, but however, it's tied to the bonus action dash. Whenever the orcs use their dash, they gain temporary hit points equal to their proficiency bonus. Here, I have changed it around, using it as a reaction instead. By the way, I know I'm kind of like stretching the passive bonus thing, since this isn't passive, it's kind of active, but you know, whatever, I can do what I want. There's going to be exceptions to the rule. Anyway, yeah, I've changed it to be a reaction instead, because I like the idea of an orc like getting an axe to the shoulder and just like pulling it out and shrugging it off. It's a cool aesthetic. I also wanted to not crowd the bonus action. Like, I wanted to separate it from the dash. I like it being connected to the dash, but I think it gives the dash too much going on. Like, an orc being able to bonus action dash is already a pretty potent skill, and them being able to get 10 hit points on top of that, I don't know if I love it. Also, in the WotC orcs, they can only do the bonus action dash as much as their proficiency bonus. Like, the amount of times you can do it is equal to your proficiency bonus, which I don't love. I would prefer orcs just get that kind of speed in general and tie the healing to something else. And here, I tied it to exhaustion instead. Exhaustion is an underused mechanic in my opinion, and I think it makes sense. Like, as the orc tries to endure more and more damage, they're getting more and more exhaustion. In my game, if you have 6 levels of exhaustion, you dead, dude. When you go down, there's no more death saves. You're gone. So I think this adds a little bit of risk reward. If an orc is at the very end of their ropes, they can keep on fighting, but they're enduring levels of exhaustion on top of that. Now, there is an active skill. This is like the orc's ult ability that sort of gives them a lot more going on. Active skill. When you are reduced to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to be reduced to 1 hit point instead. Until the end of your next turn, your movement speed is doubled. You have advantage on weapon attack rolls, and you have advantage on strength, skill checks, and saving throws. Once you use the skill, you can't use it again until after you finish a long rest. Now, I'm probably going to add in that enemies have advantage to attack you, because I think that makes sense. This is essentially an orcish souped-up version of Reckless. I mean, orc getting doubled movement speed. Can you imagine how fast orc would be? If you get the doubled movement speed and use the bonus action dex, that's 120 feet of movement. That's crazy. But I think it makes sense. This is the orcish final stand. I wanted something epic. I wanted something big. I wanted something powerful. And while this is a really potent skill, you are still being reduced to 1 hit point. That's it, right? And even though you have advantage on strength saving throws and advantage on weapon attack rolls, it does mean that this is less useful for something like an orcish spellcaster, which I didn't want to, completely shaft to the side. Now, this is a really potent skill. I might word it so that you can't stack it with the bonus action dash. In fact, there's a part of me that kind of wants to remove the bonus action dash altogether. It was something I went back and forth on while writing up the orcs. I think that this is a really fun bit of flavor, though. I like this orc being able to just keep on enduring damage and keep on going, using the reaction as a major part of the orcish kit. Reactions in my games are a lot more of a major part of D&D. I think they're underutilized in General 5e. In fact, the entire action economy, with the exception of just your normal action, I think is underutilized, especially on the monster end, but also on the player end. So I wanted to make it more prominent here. So yeah, whoop, I got a message. Sorry. Anyway, that's my homebrew for the orcs, the ASMR, and the humans. Hope you guys enjoyed. Minor changes to what already existed, but I hope you guys found them a little bit educational. With that being said, I think it's time to move on to Thing of the Week. Hit the thing. This might come as a surprise, but I never finished Campaign 2 of Critical Role. When Campaign 3 came out, I dropped Campaign 2 to watch that instead. And while Campaign 3, I think it's really good, we just had the amazing Imogen and Laudna story arc climax. It was great. I will say, a lot of this God plot is not my thing. So I went back to watch Campaign 2 while this God plot's still going on, kind of like biding my time until we get into a plot line that I'm more interested in Campaign 3. And man, I forgot, Campaign 2 is so good. Like, this is so good. It's so good. Like, I'm in the middle of the Caduceus arc, right after Yasha and the Laughing Hand, all that stuff goes down. If you haven't watched Critical Role, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But right now, I'm essentially in an arc of the campaign that actually is kind of God-related. And seeing how much better it is here than it is in Campaign 3, at least in my opinion, it's kind of shocking to me. Like, dang, this is really good roleplay. It's really great content. And even though, like, a lot of Campaign 2 has been spoiled for me, I still find myself laughing and cheering. I still find myself on the edge of my seat regularly, which just goes to show how incredible this show is, how well Matt and the cast did with creating Critical Role Campaign 2. I love Critical Role just in general, but I've been enjoying the heck out of Campaign 2 on this watch. I mean, I didn't know if I would ever go back, but I don't regret it. This is really, really good stuff, and I'm really happy to say that I've been enjoying it a lot. It feels good to be back into Critical Role. I took a break from the show for a really long time, but I'm back, and it feels great. But yeah, there you go. That's my Thing of the Week. If you guys enjoyed this episode of Tavern Adjacent, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our RPG Horror Story series, where we talk about the best and the worst Dungeons and Dragons. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment dumb controversy to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And that's like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.